Hi, everybody. I'm Joseph Goodman of Goodman Games. We're here to talk about the Dark Tower Kickstarter. I'm going to pass the baton so we can all introduce ourselves. Let me hand it off to Chris. You go next.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chris Doyle. I'm the director of development, 5e development for Goodman Games. And I was the lucky chap who got to convert the original Dark Tower into the 5e version of Dark Tower for this Kickstarter. And then I guess I will pass it off to Mike Curtis.
I am now holding the talking bone. So yeah, so I'm Michael Curtis. Hello, everybody. And much as this project worked, after Chris got done working on 5, he handed it off to me. And then I said, okay, now what are we going to do in DCC with this? And it was my job to find somebody who was skilled enough, or not another word that starts with an S, to take this on after having worked on doing Crypt of the Devilish. So of course, Bob Brinkman, he jumped immediately to mind, and I said, Bob, do you want to do this? And expecting a no. And he said yes. So I will hand the talking bone then to Bob, and you can talk more about that whole process.
I'm Bob Brinkmen. I'm the person that surprisingly agreed to do the DCC conversion. When I said yes, Mike was like, "Are you sure? Because I've got a list of people to ask after you say no." But there was no way, right? I had to do the Dark Tower conversion. So I am.
And then he followed up with no takebacks.
Yeah, so I'm kind of the current DCC from 5e conversion monkey here at Goodman Games.
All right, thanks, everybody. So I'm going to give the viewers a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. And when we get to the really fun stuff, which is later on in the show, and then we'll dive right in. But we're going to talk first about what makes Dark Tower great. It was an adventure published in 1979 that is still popular, if not even revered to this day. So we're going to discuss why that is, what made that original so awesome. We're then going to talk about the conversion process to get it into 5e and DCC and how we made that happen. And then, as you probably know, if you're watching this, we have a Kickstarter going live tomorrow to bring this into your hands. So we're going to actually preview the Kickstarter, talk to you about the physical configuration of the boxes, and that sort of stuff, let you know about the pledge levels and the add-ons and all that kind of stuff, and get you all prepared to hopefully pledge tomorrow. So a brief overview, and I think you probably know this if you're here, but Dark Tower was published by a company called Judges Guild way back in 1979. The internet thinks it was 1980, but I asked Janelle Jaquays, who was the one who actually wrote it and illustrated it and did a lot of the production work. She confirmed the first printing came out in 79. Some people may own subsequent printings that came out in other years. And Judges Guild was famous for a lot of reasons. They essentially invented the adventure module. That was one of their early claims to fame. And they didn't just invent it, but published ones like Dark Tower, which was, and we debated this, I believe the original was 72 pages long, if I remember correctly, that original first printing, in an era where most of the TSR adventures were 8, 12, maybe 16 pages long. So it was a monster of a book for its time. And it was incredible. So I wanted to first just start talking about what made it so distinctive for its time, not just the length, but everything else. And a lot of people point back to NPCs because if you read it, I was just reading it. There's so many good NPCs. There's so many, period, so many good ones. And I know we each kind of have our favorites. Maybe Chris, tell us about what you liked about the NPCs and who were some of your favorites from the original.
Well, yeah, the NPCs were they were all over the place, and they were just so interesting and really kind of important to the story. And Janelle did a couple of really cool things, which was really kind of innovative at the time when you think about what other TSR modules were coming out at the time. But the NPCs moved around, and you can encounter them in their lair or spot, and many of them were in the village that is part of the module. But then they would be roaming around on various levels of the dungeon, which was interesting. Or they also had a sub layer down in the dungeon, so they could be found there. So that was always kind of cool. It was kind of neat, actually. You'd start reading up on an NPC in chapter 1, and then all of a sudden chapter 4 they start talking about him again, and you're like, wait, who is this dude again? And that kind of calls it back. So that was the first thing that I really kind of latched onto about the NPCs, was that mobility, which again, we take that for granted, I think, these days, because adventure writing is 40 plus years old now, so we've all kind of seen it and we've seen different things done. But when you think in the context of 1979, all the AD&D rule books were not even out yet, and this module came out, which is fascinating. And then just like I said, the interesting depth of the NPCs. There is one NPC as a former wizard that's cursed into the shape a chest, a treasure chest, but can still talk and cast spells. And he can levitate. One of his spells he can cast is levitate, and there's a hole in the ceiling that he could levitate up into, so that you kind of can't get to him, and then he can cast spells down on you and everything. Just really interesting, the thought and everything. Some of it's a little crazy and kooky and out there, but just for the time, it just kind of fits in and everything. So that's one of my favorites.
I think the entire village of Mitra's Fist has sort of a Twin Peaks vibe. There's a lot of really strange characters, and it's fun just to sort of go through that area to meet the various NPCs. One of my favorites is Beldar the Sadden, who is he was a wizard, but now he's just a drunk. And he's drunk because he's trying to prevent the evil forces from reading his mind and influencing him. So you're not sure if he needs to be fitted for like a tinfoil helmet, or if there's seriously something going on. And he's got no magic whatsoever, but he was a wizard. He promises he was a wizard. And the way all the characters interact, it really is just going to Mitra's Fist is an event in and of itself. Before you even start to delve, there's so much there and so many characters to play around with.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting the way that these aren't full fleshed out characters in the sense that we've kind of become used to them, and especially like 3.5 or Pathfinder, where you have 6 paragraphs going into the childhood history of a character. Where this is still, it's 3 or 4 sentences, and you get stuff like the bartender whose last name is Stone Teeth because his teeth are made out of stone, because he had a run in with a basilisk and he got mostly turned back to flesh, but
that's his story.
He's on his teeth or whatever, and there's somebody down in the dungeon who's a priest, and depending on when you might catch him, he might be a priest of Set, or he might be a priest of Mitra, or so you can never tell what side he's going to be on every time. He might try to kill you one time, and then you run into him again, he tries to heal you, and so it's very much that old school. The dungeon is a weird place, and to the point where the randomization of it keeps the judge or the DM on the seat too, who's this going to be, so I mean, I like the little touches like that.
Yeah, I remember one of my favorites is the 2 intelligent doors that are opposing ends of a hallway, and they've been dueling for centuries, I guess. And was it gems right in the middle, or a diamond? There's a diamond right in the middle of the hallway, and you can get involved or not. But there's so many distinctive encounters that were, this was produced back in an era when, I don't know, in my mind it was all a little more codified, and this was just wild and imaginative. It's really out there. Actually, and Chris, you touched on something that reminded me. I believe this was the first published product to make use of the new AD&D Player's Handbook, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Wasn't
correct.
it? It was.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even out yet. I believe the Monster Manual was out.
I think this came because actually I've been looking at some of the old White Dwarfs, and so they've been having the reviews, and the Judges Guild and the Dark Tower one and the Player's Handbook one are just about the same time.
Yeah.
So I think Janelle had access to, she had access to it because she definitely draws on it. But I know this predates the DMG. I know the Dungeon Masters, I wasn't even out at this point, so.
Yeah.
So, that's just fascinating to think about that. Not that we've ever put books out before, like core books were ever published or not,
never
for a new edition or anything like that. But it's fascinating to just think about trying to put together a massive 72-page adventure, and then the entire core set of the rule books isn't out yet. So
yeah.
I mean, that's one of the great things about the original version of it, is it because there's rules to cover up the stuff where there's no rules for,
exactly.
Just like a nausea saving throw in one encounter, just because, I mean, little stuff like that, which if I can recall, it goes, it's all, no, I get it, but it's basically, it's you have to make a roll. It's not it's kind of like an ability check.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sections where it's roll under your constitution, or a couple that were roll under your intelligence +2. Pretty, in my mind, innovative mechanics that I don't remember in the TSR modules of the same era, because she was just kind of coming up with ways to evaluate situations. It was cool.
rules, not rulings, you know, or rulings, not
Yeah.
rules, really. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, it's very DCC in that way. We don't have a rule for it. Well, we'll punt.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that map or maps. I mean, Janelle has talked about her, I think she called it non-linearity and just the three-dimensionality of it. But the map had so many ways in, so many ways out, so many unique elements. Which of those was your favorite? And tell us about it, guys.
Yeah, I mean, it was again innovative because there was, I forget, to get to level 1 of the dungeon, there's 6 or 7. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. You know, there's so many of them that in the beginning of the chapter for level 1, I listed them all in bullet points saying you could enter this way, this way, this way, this way. And I'm sure that the readers are going to be like, oh wow, this is great that this is there. Nope, just pulling the curtain back a little bit. That was really kind of for me because it was a little confusing when you're you know, everybody thinks, oh wow, you just take level 1 and just convert it. But when you're converting it, you're trying to think, wait, where does this passage go to here? And then you're like, wait a minute, but if this hooks up to this, then this doesn't hook up with that. And there are actually some mistakes in the maps that if you read the essays by some of the historians that we have, they actually went in and they kind of fixed the maps and everything. We're hoping our version is going to have all fixed maps and everything.
Of course it will. Of course it will.
We're striving. We're striving for that. But you know, really, we won't know if they're all fixed unless Tim, the Wonder Wizard, actually puts his eye on it and actually vets it and gives it his thumbs up, because he'll find one 5-foot square that's off. He'll find one stairway that doesn't match up from one level to one level and say, oh wow, should we rewrite this whole map? You gotta redraw it, and it's like, ah.
Chris is talking about Tim Ladzinski, and if you guys don't know, he's the editor on the OAR line, and he has like radar for typos and map errors. He has an uncanny ability to find the most, you know, the tiniest little mistakes that everybody else missed.
Yep, and he's cornered some very famous cartographers that worked for TSR and said, hey, what's the deal here? And then got the
Well, especially because he's going back to them about maps they did 40 years ago and pointing out that they're off by 1 square on like this shoot from level 2 to 3.
Tim, if you're watching this, we love you.
Yeah, you have an incredible ability to locate, like, and identify and basically be an editor. It's amazing. But yeah, the maps are awesome. There's a lot of ways in, a lot of ways out, a lot of like the random teleportation rooms, teleportation walls.
Well,
like,
there's a lot of ways to get yourselves in trouble very early on in that adventure. One of my playtest groups, discovered 2 ways into the White Tower while they were still just dipping their feet into the dungeon, and they were absolutely terrified by the implications of that. You really have to choose your path carefully, or you're going to end up over your head very quickly. And that's kind of a lot of fun, right? It takes a standard trope of, there's level 1, then level 2 is harder, then level 3 is harder, and you're on level 1, and all of a sudden you're on level 4, and you're praying for your life because there was no intervening 2 and 3. I really dig it.
I'm going to coin a term now that has never been uttered about Dark Tower in 40 years of history of it. Dark Tower is the turducken of dungeons. Because it is a dungeon literally stuffed with other dungeons, because it's not just your standard, like we go in, there's level 1, level 2, level 3, but there's still like there's the Tower of Vitra and there's the Tower of Set, which are like inside the dungeons, but yet they're separate dungeons in and of self-contained in and of themselves and everything. So just when you find the dungeon, then you discover there's another dungeon to go into. So
I love in the chat the Tur Dungeon.
Yes.
Dungeon. Yes. No, it's
the dungeon.
I think we'll withhold from reworking the Kickstarter to work that term in, because it may not resonate with all fans. But you're onto something, Mike. Because I mean, Janelle described it as like, because the original plot was, let's see, the White Tower was there, then the Black Tower appeared, then I believe the mountain collapsed on top of them, then people excavated it, then they built a new village on top. So like, there's already this like multi-layered strata of dungeon to begin with. You're right, it is like dungeon inside dungeon inside dungeon.
Well, it really helps you feel the history, right? I mean, there's a lot of history that is written into the storyline, and just the way the dungeons are laid out, you get a real grasp for that very quickly, and that really just adds one more layer to the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think Janelle also had a knack for just creating interesting creatures to populate it, not just the NPCs, but even some of the monsters. I know, Mike, you were talking on another broadcast about the metal spider, which also struck me when I read it. You want to tell us all about that metal spider?
Yeah, so we're looking backwards after like 40 years of game design and everything, and it's especially just the way this is especially true for for Dungeons and Dragons, like from like 3.0. 3.0 is very, everything had to be codified. It's like, oh, this is a construct type creature, and this is this and this and this. And in Dark Tower, there's a metallic spider. And like we would be used to now this big splot buck and say, oh, it's immune to sleep and it's immune to charm and just, slashing weapons do half damage because of metallic. But this is like, yeah, it's a metal spider. It's like, well,
one-liner.
Like, can you charm it? It's like, that's kind of up to the DM. Sure, why not? I mean, it's just a spider made out of metal, right? I mean, there's nothing special about other than the fact it's calls out as a metal spider, and that sort of brevity. Dark Tower is a very interesting dungeon without being a quote unquote a funhouse dungeon.
Yes.
It's not one of those like there are things in here like there's no rational explanation for this. It's like you don't really get like the deep story why these two doors are mad at each other, in an argument or anything like that. But at the same time, it's just not like, ooh, I'm being wacky. It's just kind of like literally you have left the real world behind, and Dark Tower is operating by its own unspoken internal logic. So that's very much an old school sort of design stuff. And before there was a new school, that was just a way to do it. And
that's a feeling of wonder.
Yeah.
As opposed to just weirdness.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah, because there are large parts of the dungeon that are carefully constructed. I mean, like Chris was saying, the NPCs move around. You can find them at different places doing certain things. Like there's inherent conflicts inside the setup, and a lot of it is very intelligently constructed. And then there's also just the dungeon stuff, and the dungeon stuff is really creative. It's not just 2 zombies in this room and 4 skeletons over here and a bunch of something else over here. It's just, some of them are fascinating and awesome.
Yeah. And it's interactive to the point where some of like the NPCs we were talking about show up as wandering monsters. And
yes.
if you kill them as a wandering monster, guess what? They'll show up later on. It's like, so theoretically you can winnow down the chances of you running into people, by killing them outside of their, but again, this being old school, like I think there's some of them is just like you might encounter the priest of Set, and there's a 30% chance he has 1d6 sub-priests with him, and then there's a 33% he's got 66 guardians with him, so it might not be an easy fight, but
you can murder hobo your way through it for fun and profit. You can if that's the route you want to take, but you can also go very role play heavy, which is kind of unusual for adventures of the time, right? Most adventures of the time, it was okay, well, there's a dragon in this room and there's 4 frost giants in this room and here's a stat block, whereas here you've got recurring characters, and so there's actually a benefit to getting to know some of these people and talking to them and maybe not immediately trying to kill them or be killed by them.
Yep.
You might not always have a choice in that, but
and you've definitely got the interplay of 2 different distinct factions. You've got the followers of Set, and then you've got the faithful of Mitra. And you really need to work on those 2 from both ends so that can facilitate you getting through some of the encounters, because the good guys really need to probably run into some of the faithful of Mitra, and there's some Mitriatic. Oh, I forget if that's the way.
Matraic, I think we decided.
Yeah, there's it's you can write these words, but boy, you can't say them. But yeah, so there's a bunch of artifacts that you're probably going to want to get. There's also some bad artifacts as well.
There's definitely some cursed items in this. Are cursed items.
Oh yeah, cursed items these are the types of items that when your characters get them, they will 10 years, 20 years later, they'll be talking about, oh, remember that item? Like they will not forget these items.
In one of my playtest groups, they found one of the cursed items, and it's one of those things where each round the item is active, it has an increasing percentage chance of going very, very bad. And he put on the item, he activated it, and then he decided he was going to go to sleep. I'm like, well, 8 hours is a whole lot of rounds. They still haven't figured out how to fix that. Yeah.
I still haven't figured out how many rounds that is.
Well, it varies from system to system.
Right. That's and
It's like
Yeah.
the D&D SATs.
Yep.
Like in second edition, how many rounds and 8 hours of sleep? And what did it happen with your cursed helm? Yeah. No, and I love how a lot of the NPCs have motivations listed, which nowadays we just assume. But in that era, that was unique. I think completely new, if not very new. And a lot of them, to your point, Chris, you have to sort of build some alliances to come out okay in here. And a lot of them, Janelle described their motivation for being a henchman. Like this person might, join the party if the following, or if they get this out of the situation, and so on.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting and a fun way to have interactions with them.
Very true.
And that brings us to the Chosen Sons of Set, which we managed to write an entire book about. So first, let's just throw that out there. So this Kickstarter funds a conversion of the original Dark Tower, and their second book called The Chosen Sons of Set. Chris, maybe do you want to tell everybody, where that is in the original adventure and how we sort of drew inspiration from that?
Yeah, so Set has a lot of minions. Some of them are actually the minions of Set, which are kind of fiendish / statue-like creatures. But he also has a bunch of fiends that he has created over the years, and they are a mishmash. They're mostly serpentine creatures, but they're a mishmash of all different body types and also abilities. And Janelle in the original module developed all of these crazy tables on how you can randomly determine what your son of Set is. And there's two types of sons of Set. There's the lesser sons of Set. There's they don't tell you how many of those Set has. They kind of imply hundreds or 100. But then there's only 4 chosen sons of Set, and they are a little bit. They're your boss monsters basically. So they're definitely a cut above. And then there's this whole dynamic of the sons of Set kind of going at each other. Like if a lesser son ever defeats a chosen son, it would automatically become a chosen son. So it's kind of a fascinating kind of dynamic. So obviously for our conversion processes, we converted all of those things over to the new rule systems, DCC or 5e as appropriate. But then when what really came, if you look over my shoulder, you can see we did a free RPG Day module last year, the Sunken Temple of Set. And I designed one of these lesser sons and put them in there, and I made up a whole backstory to everything. And we really kind of were like, it kind of came out kind of neat. And we're like, hey, like we could do more modules on these. And then, we were thinking about it and we're like, well, yeah, we should do like 3 more modules or something. And then it started, as soon as I think Joe was the one who said, let's do 3 more modules. And I said, okay. And instantly when he said that, there's 4 chosen sons of Set. One of them is in Dark Tower, and then again, I know I can't do math as I just explained a couple of minutes ago, but I could do that math where there's 3 more chosen sons out there. So we discussed it with Janelle, and she actually loved the idea that we're going to actually kind of breathe more life and backstory into the chosen sons of Set. We tweaked the rules on the sons of Set a little bit, basically giving the PCs some time. And now there's an opportunity that they can actually hunt down all 4 chosen sons of Set and defeat them before they can ascend. New ones can ascend. And we developed a whole 3 extra modules all around it. And that's going to be the 3rd book in the trilogy that we have coming out.
And then, Mike, you coined the term Janelleverse.
yes, the Janelleverse.
To describe this sort of, because it used to be just a little town with a little bit of backstory, and now we have a sort of developing region with with chosen sons of Sets, adventures set around the chosen sons of Set. Tell us more about the Janelleverse.
So, no, it was just something that Chris and I had discussed about, is that, we own Dark Tower now. So, we can do whatever we want with it, as long as Janelle's kind of cool with it, so we just, again, the chosen son of Set, that kind of like started off, we realized is, well, we're kickstarting this, right? We'll see if people are interested in it, so, one of the things we were talking about is, maybe stretch goals, we might still have more stuff to be thrown in there. And then, we've already done one standalone adventure for it. So, if people, literally you have 2 gods going at one another, and you have this kind of very much, it's sort of, we've talked about this, it's how we interpret setting. There's a lot of personal baggage in this, because there's a very Egyptian theme going on it, But my first experience of like set in Mitra was like the Savage Sword of Conan comics. So it's like, so me, I picture this more as like a Hyborian age stuff. So, you know, something there's literally an entire world outside of Mitra's Fist that we can just continue to build on, you know, I mean, so,
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
so we
even
did
the
that.
original Dark Tower was, so we did that. Yeah, it was
Yes.
filled with so many references. Yeah, like you could totally do that, you know?
Yeah, so one of the things we did was we now have a region map where we located Mitra's Fist, and all these other 3 modules to the Chosen Sons of Set are all spread out in different locations. So this gives your group an opportunity to go, you know, it's not an entire campaign setting, it's not an entire world, but it's a slice. It's a slice that you could easily put in your campaign where you're like, oh, hey, yeah, I haven't fully developed this desert area of my campaign. Boom, now you have a whole setting, if you will, a little mini setting, a sandbox, literally a sandbox, because it's desert.
I think you're being too modest, Chris, when you say that it's not a campaign setting. While it's certainly not a fleshed out world, Dark Tower was already almost a campaign to itself.
That's
And once you factor in the Sunken Temple and the Sons of Set, this really is a very complete campaign that you can run your characters through, and there's boundless possibility, just like there is with the Sons of Sets, right? There's so many ways you can go and so many things you can do that calling this an adventure, I think, is kind of underselling it.
No.
And you know, Dark Tower is a higher level adventure too. So if it's popular, I mean, kind of what we did for the Chain Coffin. The Chain Coffin is a higher level DCC adventure, and we ended up developing all these adventures which kind of were the prelude up until Chain Coffin. So there's nothing that says, you know, I mean, we can start dropping hints about, you know, set in Mitra and the Dark Tower, you know, and you know, in a first level, you know, adventure at some point, if people are like, and you know, generally continue to flesh things out. So.
It's like publishing episode 4 before episode 1. There's a precedent set for that. You know,
that's never gone poorly. You know?
And I was reading in the chat, G Blaster knows my love of Star Wars, so he's dropping a medieval Coruscant line in there. So he's like, yeah, he knows how to get me all excited about things.
Yeah.
But we won Kenobi less than 2 weeks away.
So stay on target. Back to Dark Tower. So, actually, Bob, I have a question for you. You had discussed some of the traps in the original adventure. I mean, there's some really, what I'd call, for the time, innovative traps. Tell us about some of your traps from the original Dark Tower, some of your favorites.
My absolute favorite trap is a circular hallway with strange wear patterns, where there is a giant silent ball of stone that is rolling around that you never see coming. And it's one of those great traps where when you spring it on your players, you've already hit start on the timer on your phone, because they only have a very brief window of time to tell you what they're doing before bad things happen. And I cannot stress how much I enjoyed that particular trap, and watching various parties absolutely panic and fail at coming up with an idea before they were crushed asunder by the big ball. But there's also there's traps that are sort of traps and sort of NPC encounters, where you go in and you start kind of mucking with something and it comes to life and it gets very angry. There's also a wonderful on the same level, actually, with the circular hallway. There is a pit trap that affects the environment of a large section of the dungeon, because it gets flooded and then the water has to go somewhere, and it pisses off everybody that lives nearby because they all get flooded. And so your chances of dealing nicely with like these goblins and hobgoblins goes right out the window, because they're all wet and have like trench foot and stuff. And oh my God, it is so much fun. I love it.
Our layer's going to get black mold. That's it.
Yeah, right?
That's how
Living
we're
in
going to take them
Florida, I
down.
feel their pain. You know, a little bit of moisture goes a long way.
Yeah, then there's one of my favorites. There's like 4 columns, and then there's a globe of glass, if I recall, like hung on the columns with like fishing wire or something. And if you just so much as disturb the column, the glass, if I remember this right, it falls and shatters and releases some sort of poison gas. and so basically any thief who, you know, starts messing around with the columns, or any fighter tries to climb it, like the moment you jostle them, the trap goes off. You know, you just have to, there's just a lot of stuff in there. It's so much more than the traditional pit trap, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and I've got to say, having been working on some of the Sons of Set material, as everybody was working on those adventures, they kept that dynamic in mind. The traps in those adventure are not your standard codified 10-foot pit trap or pit trap with spikes. There's a lot of great creativity there too. So this new team has really carried it forward beautifully. And some of those are quite fiendish, Chris. Some of those traps are very fiendish.
And I'll tell you why that is because when I put the call out for these 3 modules, I wanted only people that were familiar with the original. They had to own the original module and hopefully have experience with it. And I was able to find 3 writers that were available, and all were like, oh, Dark Tower. They were like, I would love to do something involved with Dark Tower. And they had that exactly. And that was my same thought that came through, Bob, when I got the modules in. I was like, wow, this is perfect. It's like they caught the essence of it. They caught what we were looking for. You know, I gave them the tools they needed. I gave them the little nudge of direction of this is what I want. And then, you know, we all got together on a Zoom call to make sure that we didn't get 3 of the same type of dungeon. Because we have one that's specifically set in a city, so it's kind of like an urban crawl. We got one that's specifically a dungeon crawl, and the other is what I kind of call a wilderness crawl that actually has you traveling around before you get to the final dungeon, if you will, the kind of mini dungeon.
Yeah.
So we wanted them all to kind of have their own voice, and kind of not all be like very samey, because if you went through the original Dark Tower, you're probably tired of going underground and level after level after level. We wanted to kind of mix it up a little bit. So,
well, I think it's so important. I mean, Dark Tower itself is a reason to be excited. It's why I was excited. It's why I said yes to Mike. I was really excited to do anything involving Dark Tower. But this next volume, this companion volume with the new material, keeps that going. And I cannot stress enough how exciting those adventures are as well when you work them into this campaign world. They're fantastic. And so it really becomes something special. The old and the new really marry together well in this set.
For sure. Now, I think, actually, Elena, if you can bring up some graphics, maybe you can bring up that picture of the 3-book set of the 5e box set. And we're going to talk to you guys about some of the product itself and where it ended up. This is a great segue since we're talking about the different volumes. And we'll show you guys some previews of, you know, our digitally rendered previews of the books, and then we'll work our way into the Kickstarter itself. What you're seeing here is a rendering of the 5e box set edition, Original Adventures Reincarnated #7. The book widths will be slightly different. The first volume will be a little skinnier because the first volume is going to have the reprint of the original, as well as some introductory essays by basically several gaming luminaries who are excited to comment on it. The second volume will probably be a little thicker than the graphic because that's the actual Dark Tower proper. And the third volume is the Chosen Sons of Set. So first things, just to call out, and I'm going to answer some of the earlier questions in the chat. This is a 3-volume hardcover slipcase edition. So if you have Temple of Elemental Evil, it's probably going to be a little bit thicker by the time this is all done. And yes, it will be expensive to ship. So it'll be, in the US, we ship media mail, which is, even with something like this, is, I'm going to say a number. I have to add all these caveats because the world is changing every day, blah, blah, blah. But probably 20, 25 bucks, something like that in the US, given the weight. But overseas, it'll be very expensive. And I wish I could do something about that, but I can't. It's the Postal Service. But it's going to be a monster book and just really exciting. And now, Elena, if you can show the other box set, the DCC edition. So this has San Julian's cover for the Chosen Sons of Set. We put it on the free RPG Day module last year. You can see it here. He actually did a second cover as well, which we'll show you in a little bit in the Kickstarter preview. But the DCC edition, as Mike and Bob can attest, is you know, also awesome. Slightly different page counts just due to the slightly different mix of rules. But again, 3 volumes. Volume 1 is the reprint of the classic. Volume 2 is the conversion of the classic. And then Volume 3 is the Chosen Sons of Set. And yes, to quote G Blaster, OMG, it does look that good. So why don't I share my screen and we'll show you a preview of the actual Kickstarter and start talking through some of the details. All right, so hopefully you guys can all see this. This is what you'll see tomorrow. It will go live tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific, which is 11 a.m. Eastern. So hopefully you can hang out and back this project in. I'm just going to walk through this. Hey, you know, Mike Chris, Bob, jump in as I go if there's stuff I forget or stuff you guys want to add or whatever. First of all, the logo, that logo is awesome. Janelle drew that, whatever it was, 40 years ago. So we had to open the logo. It's amazing. So we're going to talk a little bit about the content of the Kickstarter itself, the add-ons and so on, then I'll go over the pledge levels. And actually, this reminds me, I forgot to say this earlier. Dark Tower was ranked in the top 30 adventure modules of all time. When Dungeon Magazine did that list, whenever that was, 10, 15 years ago. And it was number 21 on that list. It's remained that impressive for so long. And it was actually the only adventure on that list that was not published by TSR. And that's a fact worth noting. And I believe, Chris, you want to tell the story you have about, I believe it's John D. Rateliff, who was one of the proponents of that, and his essay is in here as well.
Yeah, so he's the one that was banging his fist on the table. He was on that panel of getting Dark Tower, included in that list. And I don't know how it went, obviously, but his story on how he discovered Dark Tower was fascinating. So he was in college at the time, or just out of college, but money was extremely tight. And he went to his local game store and he saw the G modules were there. I believe G1, I think he said, was there. And then there was this Dark Tower module, and G1 was all of 8 pages. And it cost, I think he said it cost $5. And then there was Dark Tower, which I think he said cost $10. It might have been $15, but it came in at a whopping 72 pages. And his thought process was, well, I'm going to get a lot more bang for my buck over here. So that's how he stumbled across the original, and how he was really moved on it, so much so that when they did that top 30 list, he was the one in the room that said, this has got to make the list, guys, and it did. So yeah.
And Eric Mona was the editor of Dungeon at that time, and he wrote another essay for the book on his remembrances of that process in the module and including it, and it's fascinating reading. But there's a reason it made that list, and a lot of people think it should still be up there. So for
There's
those
a lot of other adventures that were on the list that were inspired and took things from Dark Tower and carried them forward. It was very fundamental in a lot of adventures that came after.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the replicator, and according to the price list in the back, Dark Tower was $5.50.
$5.50?
Wow.
That's crazy.
What a deal.
Yep.
That's crazy. I thought it was 10. Maybe the store was selling it for 10.
Probably.
Yeah, it marked it up.
Yeah.
So for those of you who pledge early, in the first 48 hours, there will be a pledge level that includes a print by Janelle. So Janelle, here's an image of the print. This print will only be available to those who pledge in the first 48 hours. If you pledge for a print book, you'll get a physical print copy of the print. If you pledge for a digital edition, you'll get a high res that you can either display on your own or print as well. These are actually images that were used to create the Dark Tower miniatures line, which is produced by Otherworld Miniatures. And as far as I'm aware, they've never been published before. They existed in sketch form. And for this Kickstarter, Janelle basically inked the sketches, finalized the imagery, and produced this print, which is really cool. I think it's the first new Dark Tower art by Janelle in 4 decades or something like that. But we had to put it to use somehow. So adventure summary, we've kind of talked about this, so I'm going to skim over this part. What's in the books? We talked about this too. 3 huge hardcovers. This is the first San Julian painting, which doesn't fully fit on my screen, but it's amazing. And then here is the second painting that San Julian just finished. Maybe Chris, you can talk about this. I know it has, Chosen Sons of Set, and you provided him with some of the inspiration here.
Yeah, so this is a little sneak peek of the artist's rendition of the new Chosen Sons of Set. I'm not sure they're like exactly what they were. We did send the artist kind of a brief description of each, and this is what they came up with. So as you can see, very variable appearances there. You can see the one in the middle there kind of looks a little bit like a Medusa, which actually factors very important into the adventure. So I'll let you guys discover that on your own, or we'll have the author on at some point to talk about that. But yeah, really, really fascinating. You can see, in some of the artwork in the original on the other Sons of Set, just wildly variable appearances, so that your characters aren't going to know when they start battling this strange looking creature that it's a Son of Set. Eventually they might start figuring it out, but they're just gonna be like, wow, this is just like another weird lizard type creature or snake like creature. But it's got completely wildly different abilities. And when I say wildly different abilities, the abilities are all over the place, and some of them you know, when you bring random tables into things, they kind of sometimes will not make sense. But yeah, you can get like, you can get like, cast cleric spells, cast wizard spells, just, drop a cone of cold for no reason. So yeah, it's very, very interesting system that you can just have a lot of fun with. And we're going to have a lot of fun with that even during this Kickstarter. So
that brings up, I don't think we mentioned yet, the original adventure had, what was it, several pages of tables for randomly determining the Sons of Set. Remember, 4 pages, I want to say. It was a significant chunk of page count devoted to these really creative tables for all the different powers and appearances and things like that.
Yep, they got even bigger in the 5e version.
Yeah, I was about to say the new versions maintain that in DCC terms, it's sort of like a combination of the how to build a dragon tables and how to build a demon tables together.
As you do.
Yes. And so one thing we still have to decide is which cover image to put on which book. We have, obviously Janelle's original cover, which is awesome, and then of course these 2 San Julian covers. So we'll figure that out. But there's a lot of good material to work with here. Now, a couple other things to note about this Kickstarter. There's some really cool add-on items. Partly just because we have the ability, we wanted to include a lot of different things. So we have a Dark Tower t-shirt, which of course everybody should own and wear. But that original logo, I love it. The original art, I love it. So it's a basic t-shirt concept and a black tee, which is awesome. We have dice. So when I was talking to Tom from Impact Miniatures, I mean, everybody's a fan of this adventure, and he had this brilliant idea of making dice that are gold for Mitra, but with green letters for set. So we're going to do a special one of dice themed to Dark Tower. What you see here is the 7 die edition for 5e players, or basically any RPG except DCC RPG. Then there will also be a 14 die set for a DCC that includes the 3, the 5, the 7, the 14, etc. The full range of dice. One technicality for DCC fans, the 4-sided die, if you can see it in the back there, actually varies slightly. It's the only die that will be different between sets. On the DCC set, it'll be the upward facing version that he uses. On this set, it'll be that traditional D4. You can add on this set of dice, and these dice are being produced for this Kickstarter. Then we have miniatures. So there's a company out there called Otherworld Miniatures that has actually been doing Dark Tower miniatures for quite some time. And actually, if you visit their website, you can buy them right now. But what they're doing for this Kickstarter is they're packaging them in sort of easy sets that are priced a little more affordably. Each set is $50 and has 6 to 9 figures. What you're seeing here are the beautifully painted versions. They're actually supplied in unpainted pewter, so it's not going to be this awesome when you get it. But Denizens of Mitra's Fist, which has 7 of the NPCs. Servants of Set, which also has 7 figures. And then you have Followers of Mitra that has 9 figures. So you can add those on as well. Then we have the previous Original Adventures Reincarnated books, which we're offering at a 20% off rate for as add-ons for this Kickstarter. And actually, to answer a question from several people asked earlier in this show, basically, wow, you're doing non-TSR adventures now. The answer is yes. There's a lot of really cool classic material out there that we could convert over time. So this line will continue to evolve, and I think satisfy everybody for what's in there. But there's more cool stuff to come in the OAR line. But obviously, this one is Dark Tower. And then campaign coins. So this is really cool. There's a company out there called Campaign Coins that makes you should check them out. They have a wide variety of metal coins that are really cool and useful for many games. But Janelle actually designed these coin concepts, and you can see them here in the mock-up for silver, gold, platinum, and copper. And so this is a set of 20 custom coins in a velvet pouch. And we were talking too, these could also be used as inspiration tokens or fleeting luck tokens, as well as just campaign accessories as well. So you can add those on. And then VTT support will have a Fantasy Grounds edition, as well as a platform neutral set of maps and tokens. Stretch goals. So these are always fun. These are a mix right now, and you can read this as I scroll through here, but mix of physical, improvements on the product, like foil printing, ribbon bookmarks. We're going to add on some additional pages to include the free RPG Day adventure from last year, as well as some new adventures that you guys have cooked up. We like the idea of a booklet of pre-generated characters, so they're kind of easy to use in their own separate booklet for play at the table. There's always room to add more content. In DCC, it's natural to write up Set and Mitra as patrons. In 5e, there's all sorts of new magic item possibilities. The poster map of the region that's been developed, full color in sheets. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff we can do with this. And then we have ideas for going even further than this into the Janella-verse and the expanded Dark Tower content if we happen to make it past 250K. Oh yeah, shipping costs, just to call it out, shipping is extremely volatile right now. I mean, for all sorts of reasons. First COVID, then just shipping problems in general, then the price of fuel, and now the terrible situation in Europe. So shipping will be evaluated at the time the items ship. In the US, like I said, we can ship medium mail, which is typically pretty affordable. International is really challenging right now, and I have no idea how to predict what it'll be like by the time this ships.
But I'd like to throw in that unlike our previous OR books, there is a PDF option for this,
Good reminder.
product, and that's never been available in any of the other OR books before. So you know, I know a PDF is not the same as the nice big chunky books to some people, but hey, that's at least an option where you don't have to get into the sticky situation that shipping is. We all know shipping is terrible right now. We have no idea what it's going to look like next year. It's kind of silly to think that when this product ships, that shipping is going to be better. We're all hoping it's going to be better, but let's be honest, does it really happen that way in the real world? So
that's why I stay in the fantasy world, Chris. Let's keep talking about fantasy.
okay, I'm sorry. All right, we're
Go
back
back to talk
to
about
Doyle and Dark
monsters.
Tower.
Yeah.
All hail Mitra.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then there's if you guys don't know 20 Sides to Every Story, you should check it out. They do Twitch broadcasts, which are excellent live plays of many different things. But they're actually going to be running live plays of Dark Tower. So you can check out, they're going to do both editions, 5e and DCC. The schedule's here. They're going to be running 5e versions on May 29th and June 5th, and then the DCC edition on June 3rd and June 10th. So please check that out if you get a chance. And then down here, we have some additional stuff. You can buy the DCC First Time Pan Kit as an add-on if you're new to the game. And then there's been several videos, or I should say various versions of Twitch broadcasts and other such things that have happened in the past. So we have links to some videos out there where you can hear all of us talk about Dark Tower again, if you want to hear it again. But actually what's interesting, there's so many interesting NPCs. We do talk about different NPCs in every one of these, but more videos out there if you want to hear more discussion. So then the cover pledge levels, I mentioned that if you pledge in the first 48 hours, you get the print. So if you can, please, jump in early on. The PDF is $50, and then the print edition is $100 for either DCC or 5e. There is a Fantasy Grounds edition here, and you'll see it says first 48. The spelling of first 48 varies by pledge level, basically because there's a character limit in the way Kickstarter makes us list the pledge levels. So there's no difference between first 48 hours and FRST 48. It's just the pledge levels. You can pledge for PDF, Fantasy Grounds, or print plus PDF, and there are add-ons. So if you get the print, for example, you can add on the Fantasy Grounds. Some people wanted both editions, so we have that level here, and then there's a retailer level as well. And so I'm going to stop sharing now. If you have any questions or anything, or honestly, if you missed a pledge level or something like that, call it out. We still have a couple hours to change this. It'll go live tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, and another thing to add for those of you that are really concerned about shipping, and it is certainly a concern, but there is a retail pledge available. So that's your cue if you don't want to have to deal with the messiness of shipping, is to go down to your friendly local game store and convince them to back at that level, and they will get it when backers get it. So you'll still get your copy. I'm sure that's the beauty of friendly local game stores. You can talk to them, and if they back it, and then you say, I will buy one of those copies, I'm sure they'll take your money.
Yeah.
So that's another way around it too. So and you should get it about the same time when backers are going to get it. So you're not going to feel left out when everybody else is already 2 levels into the Dark Tower.
My friendly local game store, they go through the OR books like hotcakes. Every time I go in there, the owner is just like, when's the next one coming out? It's like, I can't keep these things in stock, so, and and they're not big, I mean they're not big DCC fans just because I'm not there enough, but the 5e stuff is just like, it's fun. So yeah, so you can, that's anecdotal evidence you can get to your own friendly local game store and say, yeah, these things sell. So yeah.
It's actually, I want to show Janelle's original cover because I don't think I showed that earlier. It's just so good. And everybody, I just wanted to show this because this is the original cover art from way back in the day, 1979. It's just so good. It's amazing how the quality of the product stands up. Obviously the writing, the design, the dungeon experience, but even the art in the original adventure from the 70s is great and publishable even by modern standards. But this is the actual cover that was on that original adventure, and it's just so cool. So that's why we're doing a t-shirt version. There's basically a version of this image because it's just so great.
And it says 550 right on the cover too.
But that's
Which-
we could have just checked
Which,
it out.
since I'm a number guy, if you want to adjust that for inflation, Dark Tower was about 23, 24 bucks back when it was released.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought it was actually closer to 40, but but yeah, it's so if people were asking for like an original the original price on it, well, you're almost getting it there. So,
Somebody wanted a pledge level for $5.50.
yeah.
Yeah, like 4 pages.
Yep.
Give me the
We'll send
first
you a
4
photo
pages.
of the PDF.
Yes.
We're giving it to you. We're giving it to you, but in $2022. That's it. You know.
Yeah.
So it's,
Actually, Bob, I liked your joke on one of the shows when you were talking about the PDF. Like this thing has so many pages. It's 746 pages, I believe, was the
Yeah, the
kind of
PDF
total amount
weighs
of
10
material.
pounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I know, but no shipping for that.
Yeah, no shipping.
And in the chat, Father Goose 83. Yeah, I agree. We're gonna put that original art on book 1 just because it's so good. The other thing I want to do, which you can kind of see in the Kickstarter graphics, I love the idea of spines with interconnecting art. Actually, you can see, actually wrong shoulder. You can see behind me on my shoulder, if my digital pointer is working. The goal is going to be to actually print the original logo across the spine. So when you see all 3 spines together, the art lays out across them, which would look really cool. Anyway, I think that's all we had to cover. Anything else I forgot to mention, or you guys remember I forgot to mention?
I don't think so. I mean, we can remind folks, right? It goes live tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. PST, 11 a.m. EST, and I don't know what that is in like UT GST, but.
if we didn't mention it in this video, go watch the other ones because we've mentioned everything at some point. Just not necessarily, we don't remember which
Well,
ones
we're
we've
gonna
talked
make
about,
you
what
hunt for
videos
it.
anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's 3 to 4 more hours of video to watch after this one.
The stretch goal will be the Dark Tower documentary where we edit all the existing footage into one concrete document.
We could do that and still beat some of the D&D documentaries, to release. You know that, right?
Can we take 5 years to work on it?
Juicy details on the DCC conversion. I don't know what sort of details you want. I have my players have learned that giant rats aren't a suitable thing for quick leveling. In DCC, giant rats can TPK a party if you're not careful. The original swinginess of the adventure and the strangeness of the adventure lends itself really well to DCC. So this adventure for DCC starts at 3rd level, and by the time you're done, you're built up to like 5th or 6th level, and so you really need to choose your battles carefully at the beginning. When you're 3rd level, if you find yourself in the Dark Tower by accident, you should probably leave. Parties have not, and things have gone badly. There are new spells, there's new magic items, there's plenty of new monsters, and if we hit the stretch goal, there's going to be some DCC patrons.
I will say this about the DCC version of this, because this is something Chris and I discuss a lot. Because obviously each one of us we have our own little, our own little bailiwick we're in charge of. So, so there's always some like various 5th edition and DCC have different flavors, and that's just part and parcel of it. We're and there's crossover and stuff, but so there's always like, how much do we do on one to make it feel like the other, where it's just not a blind conversion and everything. So there's a lot of back and forth about that. And Dark Tower is one of the ones I think actually skews in DCC's favor, just because it really feels like, it was written at, it's written in that period where Janelle was getting the input from the same sources that Gary was. So has a very kind of, as I said, I think very Conan when I think of Dark Tower. So this is a perfect adventure for DCC, and does not feel out of place at all. It does not feel like one of those like, oh well, they just converted it over for 5e, they just changed the stat block, everything. No, it's dumb.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So because I was asked to do this before the manuscript from Chris came over, while I knew that I was going to have to wait for room descriptions and things of that nature, I sat down and started looking at some of the stats and started converting them right off the bat from the original first ed. And once I got the 5e stuff, I would have converted it the same way, but it wasn't just, hey, let's slap some DCC stats into 5e. Although, let's face it, what is more gonzo than two intelligent talking doors that have been at war with each other for over 100 years? I mean, that screams DCC.
This is going to be interesting to see, what the response is from either product line. I mean, so there's going to be some 5e players like, what the heck is going on around this place? The DCC, like, oh yeah, we did the talking doors last Thursday. We just, one always lies, the other one always tells the truth, right? It's like that one that we got to do that,
Actually, I'm glad you brought up the feel of it. Chris actually interviewed Janelle last year for Free RPG Day, and that interview is on YouTube, and we'll link to it from the Kickstarter project. It was really interesting hearing about her inspirations, and she specifically referenced some of the early Robert E. Howard novels that, to your point, Mike, were the same ones that Gary Gygax read when he wrote, D&D. So it really does go back to the same source, and she took inspiration from the same place, which is really cool.
Yeah, Janelle said that this was Chris, you remember, was Red
Nails.
Red Nails. Yeah, Red Nails is her primary inspiration.
Which is one of my favorite Conan stories, and it really plays out nicely.
And that was one of the few Conan stories I had not read. And then when I found out that we were getting Dark Tower and we were doing it, it was the first one that I went out and bought. And I got that one separately because I do have a Conan book that's got most of it's got, I don't know, 30 or 40 of the short stories, whatever it's got in it, but it didn't have Red Nails. And I was like going through my book and I'm like, wait a minute, it's not here. And then I found it and I'm like, okay, so there's a different one. So, and I did, and I got it. It was actually really a good experience for me to actually do that read through before I actually jumped into it to kind of get the feel for everything. So it's actually probably one of my favorite Conan stories, come to think of it. So I really liked it. So
well, it's interesting because the Lost City, that was also inspired.
Yes, exactly.
So you could literally start a mega campaign. You could do the Red Nails campaign. You run them through the Lost City, and by the time they get done to the Lost City, they should be ready to take on the Dark Tower. And by the time they're done talking, they will never go underground ever again.
Ever.
Yes.
Ever. There's no reason.
And just to throw it out there, the Barry Windsor Smith comic adaptation of Red Nails is extraordinary. If you haven't had the original comic from back in the day, they did an art print edition of that too, which is amazing.
Oh wow.
So yeah. And G Blaster just made a comment on Tower the Elephant. I mean, everybody knows that one.
Yeah.
This is a total aside, but I read that to my older son. I read it out loud to him as a bedtime story, which takes like 10 nights when you're reading to a 9-year-old. Was this last year? It's actually amazing reading Robert E. Howard out loud because his stories are really lyrical and have like a whole vibe to them. When you say, I'd never read it out loud before, and they convert great to spoken word. So read them out loud sometime. That was a new experience for me. I'd read the story many times, but never out loud, and it sounds great out loud. All right. Any other questions you guys have? We're kind of getting off topic.
I do like the one door is DCC, the other's 5e. That might explain why they didn't work for 100 years.
Yes. Well, cool. Thanks everybody for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow and on the Kickstarter. We have a lot of fun stuff planned. We like to plan out these Kickstarters. So the folks you see on this show have already contributed some great essays. We've had some good conversations we recorded to talk a little bit more about it. We'll have the live plays from 20 sides to every story. Dark Tower. Sorry, I'm laughing in the chat. Not yet. Let's just say not yet.
Yeah. We told you. We warned you.
I know. Chris is like,
need a lot more people asking about Dark Tower, I think.
I know. Well, cool. Thanks, everybody. And we will hopefully see you tomorrow and on future shows and so on as we go through the Dark Tower Kickstarter. Thanks a lot.